So today, for the benefit of our newer members, I'm going to show you how to remove a lock from your musket and strip it down ready for cleaning. I won't go into the cleaning itself, I'll show you that at an event. This is the 1766 model. Most of you will have 1777s, but the principles are exactly the same. So the first thing we'll do is look at these two screws on the back, and we'll remove those. If you do them up, don't over tighten them because you can break the wood. So we'll just take these out. So put them to one side. Sometimes they vary, sometimes they're the same. So make a note of that. Always keep them very, very safe. You don't want to lose them. That will in turn release the lock itself. So I'll just put the musket to one side. So there's the lock itself. It's at rest at the moment. Always keep your musket at this at rest position when you're not using it. That's very important. And there's the other side that shows the mainspring and all the interior mechanisms like the sear and the piece that connects to the trigger. So we're now going to dismantle this for cleaning. First things first, let's remove the flint, because that makes it safe, because the flint's very sharp and you can cut yourself very easily on a flint. Please be aware of that. So we'll remove this screw here, top jaw screw. Notice that you always keep that well oiled because you put it under a lot of tension. That's the top jaw itself. And there's the flint, which in this case I've got wrapped in a piece of lead. Some people use lead, some people use leather. It comes down to the characteristics of your gun and your own experience. Okay, so the musket now looks like this. So the next piece we're going to remove is the frizzen spring here. And to do that, you will need a specialist tool called a Monte Ressort or something like that, which you apply to your gun like this. If you put the frizzen to that position, you can then apply this, and it then makes the frizzen very loose. Don't attempt to use this tool just to crush the spring together, because you will bend and eventually break your tool. Okay, you've been warned. So we'll then take another screwdriver and we'll release this screw here. I call them screws because that's what they're often called. Back in the day, they're bolts, really. Whatever you do, don't lose them because they're an imperial thread, like a Whitworth, but not quite the same. Don't lose them, they're hard to replace. So that is the frizzen spring now released. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is remove the frizzen itself, which is very simple. We'll simply undo this. Okay, again keeping it safe, and that will release your frizzen itself. A frizzen should be case hardened, and you can check if your frizzen is case hardened or not by taking a very hard tool like a metal file and attempt to scratch this surface. If the surface scratches, you need to case harden your frizzen. It simply will not spark correctly if it doesn't. If you can't scratch it, it's hard enough and you can use the gun. When you're polishing one of these, polish all this face, polish all this. Very important to keep that nice and smooth. Don't polish that face. You're only wearing away the working surface of it. So we'll put that to one side. Okay, we now have the pan itself. Okay, that's this component here. So we'll now try and remove that, if this screwdriver is the right size. As it happens, that's the one to use. There we go. Well, that releases that little screw, which in turn, oh, whoopsie daisy, which in turn releases the pan. This pan's really, really stiff, so it takes a lot of removing. Your pans, especially if you've got the brass ones, are a hell of a lot easier. So that's the pan removed. As you can see, that is now an awful lot easier to clean. So you can give that a thorough clean over, make sure you don't get too much muck in the threads, and you can go on. We don't take this off, there's no point, it's attached. On the back, I wouldn't recommend removing any of this until you've got a bit more experience. If for some reason you do need to take any of this off, please ask me or one of the other guys and we'll be happy to help you. So now we will put it all back together again. So first of all, the pan. Right, put that screw in there. These multi-tools are very useful in their own way, but I prefer a modern screwdriver any day. Right, so that's that piece done up. We're now going to replace the prism. And that screwdriver works better for removing and replacing that screw. Now when you're doing this up, the very last turn is important. It's got to have free movement. They always talked about things being as frictionless as possible. If you over tighten this screw, you can actually stop the frizzen working, particularly with the brass pans. With this steel one, it seems to be okay, but be very careful you do not over tighten that. If there's any stiffness in the frizzen at this point, seek some help because there's something that's a little bit amiss. What will happen is when the flint comes and hits this frizzen, it will simply smash your flint to pieces, and that's no good. So now we're going to refit the spring. So it goes in, there's a little lug there. We'll take the screw and refit that. Okay, this screw do up tight because you don't want to lose it. So that's nice and tight. You can now release the Monte Ressort, and that should now operate. I thoroughly recommend oiling this with a 3-in-1 oil, a really good penetrating oil. They always talked about this being as frictionless as possible because again you don't want the flint to be hitting this surface and just smashing to pieces because there's too much resistance. Also, if there's not enough resistance, if it just falls away too easily, you won't get a spark because there's no resistance at all. So there is a bit of a happy medium. Again, we'll advise you at events on that. So before we actually refit the flint, we're going to reconnect this to the gun. Make sure that the trigger itself is out of the way and not interfering at all with the mechanism, and it should come together and there should be as little gap as possible between there and there. Then the two screws, which we haven't mixed up, we'll put there and there. This is quite an old musket. You can see that this has been over tightened at some point, and that is what's caused that break in the walnut there. Right, just to double check it. And that's tight but not hard. Okay, so that's fine. We're tight down through here. That's very important, so no powder can get under the barrel or inside the lock. So as you can see, that's now all packed to get put back together nice and neat. So what we're going to do now is set our flint up. So that goes through there, like so, and then that sits there. We'll do that up. Okay, so now we want the flint to sit as nicely as possible. There are as many ways of doing this as there are reenactors and there are muskets. So this is just how I do it. So I'm going to get my flint and put it in here. And what I want to do is just ensure that this face is parallel with this face and that the flint is not stuck out to one side, because that is a great way of cutting your hand. So you want that tucked in neatly. And for now, I'm going to set that up, and I'm just simply going by eye and experience. I'm going to set that up there. Okay, now I haven't tightened it any more than finger tight because I'm going to try it. What you can do is you can take the tension of the gun, release the trigger, and you can physically put it against the frizzen like so. So that allows you to see that you've definitely got it parallel. So we can then pull it back. We'll do this up tighter. Again, you don't need to go crazy, but it does need to be reasonably tight. Okay, check it again. That looks okay. It's only hitting the bottom of the frizzen, which I'm not very happy about. It should really hit a little bit higher up. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to try and move the flint, I apologise, the flint forward a little. Go to here. I've moved it forward about 2 or 3 millimeters. Still looks parallel to me. We'll do that up. And let's see how that lands higher up. So we'll try that, see if she sparks. So we now go from half cock to full cock, and let's see if we spark. I'd say that was a pretty good spark. So there we go, that's now set up. Always leave your gun at rest. When you're doing drill or on the mark, you'll be at half cock. That's full cock, and to release, release the trigger and put it back down to rest. Thank you very much.